one thing I like about Josephine Gaboa, Captain Josephine, is her thick accent. It really does slice to the heart of Midwest America. Nobody in the Midwest can deny that. So we need all types. I used to be very self-conscious of my Southern accent, and Californians used to make fun of me when I moved here 11 years ago. And so I had a code switch. I had to code switch out to like a more California vibe. But I don't feel true to my roots. So it's I'm reclaiming myself these days.
You should. It's a beautiful accent. I like it.
Thank you. Same with you. All right, so we'll get started here. What up, fam? Welcome to Colonial Outcast, the podcast that strives to serve as the antidote for Divide-Et-Impera with Unite et Subvertite. As Greg continues his nautical voyage on the Sumud Flotilla to break the Zionist siege of Gaza, which is officially declared to be an IPC Phase 5 of famine, with an estimated 700,000 experiencing catastrophic hunger, manufactured hunger, I might add. And to add on top of that, Israel's latest push to confine the majority of Gaza's population into an already constructed concentration camp in the south through Operation Gideon's Chariots 2. Lebanon is also centered in the crosshairs of imperialism, despite the ceasefire that was agreed upon back in November. And if you weren't tracking the situation last year, Israel launched a slaughter on Lebanon with airstrikes on apartment buildings, emergency rescue facilities, fire departments, schools, and rural housing after Hezbollah and the Lebanese people in general called for the cease of the genocide against Palestinian kin, along with Ansarallah in Yemen. So in response to Israel's aggression, Hezbollah launched successful strikes against Israeli military bases and avoided Israeli civilian areas. An estimated 4,000 Lebanese, at the very least, have been murdered. But because of everything going on, we've neglected covering the continued fight that Lebanon faces. So the UN has voted to retreat its peacekeeping force in Lebanon after Israel continues to launch drone strikes. However, the real irony here that tells a bigger story of what Lebanon is facing beyond having a rabid, sick animal next door is what the Epstein class is trying to do within Lebanon. And that's what we're trying to get into with Laith from Free Palestine TV, who we are now intermittently partnering with to provide our audience with a more on-the-ground POV as opposed to strictly academic analysis. So we're going to be blending two approaches because the situation in Lebanon invokes some broader historical academic discussion of the use of Divide-Et-Impera, which is the most effective tool of the Epstein class and has been very effective in Lebanon, and it's been very effective in that region as a whole. So Laith, can you, for our audience who is not familiar with you or your channel, can you give us a brief background on yourself, who you are, why you started Free Palestine TV?
Yeah, I am half Palestinian, half Syrian, if you can be half something. I was born in Jordan, and I lived 30 years in Canada. I'm a Canadian citizen, married to an American citizen from Louisiana. Our kids have four citizenships, so I think they're going to fare a little bit better than us in our childhood and history. I have worked on issues of liberation, specifically the Palestinian issue, for decades, since the year 2000, and as well as indigenous rights, indigenous nations liberations in Canada and the US for a long time. And I've worked in print, radio, and television with that focus of giving a voice to the voiceless and championing the rights of those who are oppressed around me. And when we moved to Lebanon a few years ago, I had always in my mind to find ways to continue to service the communities that I live amongst, as this is how we should all behave. We should always try to help the communities we want to belong to and live amongst. And as the Al-Aqsa flood broke out on October 7th, 2023, I had the idea of trying to create a community TV station here in Lebanon to bring programming, coverage, journalism from the ground here in Lebanon in English to have the story of what's happening here in Lebanon reach as many people as possible. Of course, there's a lot of media in the Arabic language here, and there's a lot of resistance media that is in Arabic, but there wasn't enough people speaking to the rest of the world. And as we know, language is the imperialist, colonialist language, English, right? So we all, have to, whether we like it or not, it's the way we can communicate with the rest of the world. And luckily, the work has come to fruition. We've produced over 1,800 videos in the last year and a half.
That's insane.
Yeah. And that includes field reporting, both in the West Bank and in South Lebanon and Lebanon in general. We translated practically every resistance military video that came out to English, with not subtitles, but changing even the graphics to English, including the Hudhud, Hopoe videos that Hezbollah released during the war, surveilling the important zones in the occupied territories. And we have even a discussion show called Wartime Cafe, where we sit with personalities from the region here and get people to know, number one, the names of the thinkers and so on that are in Lebanon here or visiting Lebanon, because the audience in the West gets to see either the diaspora members of our communities, Palestinian, Arab, Lebanese people that are in the West, and or here's, the voices of Western pundits. But it's very rarely that you hear the voices of those who are on the ground here thinking and so forth. So we hope that we are doing a good job, and the website is freepalestine.video, and you can find us on all the social media platforms at Free Palestine TV.
Yeah, you do great work. I've seen your videos, and do you want to explain how you and I met? It's actually a great story, in my opinion, that story alone. I mean, and it kind of, the story of how you and I became acquainted with each other is very indicative of what Palestine does, the effect that it has on uniting people and their hearts who have entirely different backgrounds, but yet have the same heart. And so if you want to go into that real quick, who is our mutual friend that introduced us?
Yeah, Jay, or, Jedi Darwish, was a member of your crew. I've known him since 2018 when I moved to Lebanon. Jay has done a lot of amazing work in the same kind of milieu that we're working on, trying to create media spaces to bring the stories of the people and cause some, positive change in the societies that we're in. And, I worked with him in 2018. Every few years, I do a international radio marathon where we hook up all these community radio stations in North America, in Europe, in the Middle East, in South America, and we do a 24-hour broadcast that is combined together. This includes Pacifica radios, by the way, in the US, on the Nakba Day, the catastrophe day on May 14th. And so in 2018, Jay had a community radio station here in Beirut, and it was called Radio Beirut, and they participated. It was an amazing effort. And since then, we've been on and off working, and then all the events that happened, the explosion in Beirut, the corona, and eventually this war, separated us a little bit. And lo and behold, Jay was back in Lebanon when the ceasefire happened, quote unquote ceasefire.
Yeah.
And he contacted me, and we decided that's what, the effort was coming from you guys, Colonial Outcast, to document his trip back to his home in his small village in the south, to check up on the house and what happened to it. And it was,
which, by the way, if you guys want to watch that episode, it's our couple episodes back, and it's with the Aaron Bushnell commemoration. I had uploaded the Bushnell episode where G and I went out to, our Colonial Outcast own range out in the desert, and we built the sign to commemorate Aaron Bushnell. But it got shadow banned so bad. And then we uploaded your episode where G got to go back to his hometown, which you did excellent editing on and filmography on and documentation. That got shadow banned. So I said, fuck it, deleted both of them and then combined them as a double feature. It still got shadow banned. So anything involving you, Aaron Bushnell, and Darwish gets shadow banned, man. So we're hoping that this will break through. So please go check those episodes out. They're excellent.
First thing I would say is God bless the soul of Aaron Bushnell. He's a martyr of Palestine, and he's a martyr of humanity. He's a martyr of the United States of America, even if the United States doesn't recognize him as such yet. And it should come that day that the government of the U.S. commemorates this courageous humanist who gave his life to better our societies. And that trip with Jay, it was very emotional, not only for him, all of us as a crew going down. It's one thing when you're, filming the news as it's happening. It's another to be, journeying with a human as they are experiencing the reality of coming back to their home and town and visiting the destroyed graves or the attacks that on people that they know. It was a very emotional moment for everybody, and I definitely encourage everybody to watch it.
Yes, please do.
We definitely should continue this work. It is the combined efforts of all these humanist media producers, like people in Colonial Outcast and Free Palestine TV, that will overwhelm the propaganda machine of the empire. If we stay in isolated islands that are, kind of looking at each other as competitors or something like this, or thinking about markets, that's actually falling into the trap of the corporate media. And Colonial Outcast is definitely much, much better than that. And you are at the forefront of that revolutionary work.
Yes, we need to build bridges between our worlds. That is the key to success. Like, they want us to be and that's kind of the anchor of this episode is the effects that, divide and conquer has been able to accomplish in places like Lebanon, who have been a very good anecdote of divide and conquer tactics. And, it's funny because I met Darwish randomly. I went to a rap battle with Mr. Disaster in downtown LA, and he recognized me as I got out of my car, as I parked in the middle of the street, not knowing if I was able to park there. And he says, "I know who you are." I'm like, "No, you don't." And then he says, "Yeah, you're from Colonial Outcast." I'm like, "Oh shit." He's like, "You're the other guy, not Greg Stoker, but the other guy." I was like, "Okay, so that's me. I'm the other guy. I'm just the bald guy." So anyways, I got to meet him. He had his cowboy hat on. And I reached out to him and said, "Hey, you want to go out in the desert with me to do this? Because I didn't have anybody to help me out here. This is way out in the desert. It's hard to get to." And he says, "Yeah, I'll do it. I love this stuff." And then I learned all about Darwish, how he was a former infantryman in the U.S. Army, got out, and then went to work for the UN to do demining and neutralize landmines that were left behind by Israel for little kids to stumble upon and get blown up. And then he just did that work out in southern Lebanon, like removing landmines, saving God knows how many kids were saved by his work. And then recently he told us about you and I about the spite that he got out in the Sinai desert. So if y'all don't know, the Darwish, who was on that episode with with the Aaron Bushnell episode and in Free Palestine TV when he went back to his hometown, Darwish was camping out in the Sinai, and he calls me up and say he's really sick. He thinks he has dehydration. And then off, as a side note, he says, "Oh, I also got bit by a bug last night." And I'm like, "You got bit by a bug?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's really bad." I'm like, "Dude, there's no bugs that just bite you out in the Sinai. It's probably and then he sent a picture, and I'm going to pull this picture up real quick because we have to talk about it's kind of hilarious, the whole story. Where is it at? Here it is. So yeah, that's not a bug. that's a scorpion bite. And I said, gee, dude, that's a scorpion. That's a scorpion. You don't just get bit by a bug out in the Sinai. There's no bugs that do that. And he's like, oh, well, that explains it. It's like, dude, it wasn't. I mean, I'm sure you had some dehydration, but all the symptoms you described sounds like a scorpion bite. And so, anyways, he's gonna be Scorpion Man now. I told him, like, look, if you start experiencing any superpowers, you know, like your arms get extra strong, or you start like spitting out acid, you got some superpowers from that bite. So, anyways, that was hilarious when he told me that. But shifting over, like, I absolutely agree. Building bridges is one of the most effective means of fighting the empire, and that's why I chose Unite et Subvertite as our motto, which means unite and overthrow. It's the complete antidote to Divide-Et-Impera. So the goal, that's only going to be my goal at Colonial Outcast, is to build bridges just like you have by creating an English channel to connect Americans who don't know what's going on, or people in the English-speaking world who don't know what's going on in the region, or they're captivated by liberal or neoconservative media, which gives them a completely twisted angle of what's actually happening there. And like Greg has pointed out, a lot of people have this perception that what's happening in West Asia is just because the people have been fighting for thousands of years, which we know is not true. We know that West Asia, that region, has actually seen more successful peace than Europe did. Europe was constantly fighting. Europe was constantly being at wars in the most ridiculous forms possible. Whereas the West Asia saw unification and cooperation between religions that has not been seen before in the history of mankind. You know, so but again, like, the antithesis is happening to West Asia right now, and I want to talk about that. First, can you give me a recent update of what's going on in Lebanon and what Lebanon is suffering from right now, as far as external attacks?
Yes. So in the last few hours, there was, I think, at least 15 Israeli attacks in the south of Lebanon. Some of the regions that were attacked, we were just visiting this morning. We spent the whole day documenting the expansion of Israeli bases into Lebanese territory. There's 5 or 6 points that have been built up since the ceasefire in Lebanese territory, past the what is called the Blue Line, or the internationally acknowledged borders between Lebanon and Palestine. And so we drove from the Naqoura coastal village on the Mediterranean and all the way to the middle of the border zone. We couldn't, of course, cover everything in one day. We're going to continue filming in the next day. And, you know, what we saw entering some of these villages that we haven't entered before is the same that we've been seeing all around on the border. Total destruction. There's practically no homes, no buildings standing. It's like Gaza, but every village, repetitive images as if they're Gaza. And at the same time, when we were driving back from the filming, there was another attack that happened near us. So we went and filmed, and it was an attack on an industrial kind of strip mall where there's a wood shop and metal workers and so forth. And this was an attack with clearly jets, because it was bunker busters. It wasn't like small drone missiles. It was coming from an F-15 or something like that. And the explosions were so big that parts of these buildings were thrown up the hill to the road that we were filming from, like a few hundred meters up the hill from it. And this is, I think, was the first attack by a fighter jet the Israelis conducted since the end of the ceasefire. The other thing that was crazy about this attack is that while we were filming, you know, there's all this perforated metal sheeting that was, you know, kind of roofing for these structures that was on our side of the road that we're standing on. Again, this is like 300, 400 meters away from the explosion up the hill. And we noticed there was something under one of these metal sheets, and it was a man that just lost his life. He's a martyr, one of the workers in these industrial zones, and nobody had noticed because of there's dust everywhere, and he was under these metal sheets. This is kind of the daily occurrence right now in Lebanon, these attacks. And of course, there's all the pressure coming on the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah that is coinciding with this. These increases in attacks, these use of bigger bombs and targeting areas that are even north of the Litani. This attack that I was telling you that we witnessed today was, at least 10 kilometers north of the Litani River. It was, we were driving back to Beirut when it happened. So clearly, this is all designed to add to the pressure that the U.S. government is pushing on the Lebanese government to try to disarm Hezbollah.
Yes, and speaking of which, talking about the disarming of Hezbollah, the U.S. president, the Trump administration, they sent the deputy of the Middle East envoy, Morgan Ortagus, openly, where she openly praised Israel's military campaign against Lebanon while in Lebanon. It's insane to me when I think about it, how blatant they are with trying to get Lebanese civilians to be okay with the atrocities against their own civilians, like almost creating like there's some type of separation factor. Like it would be like as if, Louisiana got bombed, right? And then the president of whatever country attacked Louisiana comes to the United States and says, I think that my country did a great job bombing that state of Louisiana, and I think that everybody else in the United States should be okay with it. And it shows the dehumanization of the Lebanese people, how we expect the people in these regions to accept their own death toll as almost a necessary part of life there. It's a psychological warfare that's enforced upon them, and I think it's very incumbent upon the people in the West to hold that line and say, no, not only is it, we're not going to accept it, we want justice for whoever's orchestrating these attacks. Like, we want Israel to cease to exist because of this. They're a terrorist state. Like, that's how far the Overton window has been pushed. We have pushed the Overton window to the point where, like, not only do we want Israel to cease what it's doing to the Palestinians, we want them removed from this planet because of what they've done to people. It's like you would never accept a Nazi Germany. Nobody at the time of World War II was saying, well, Germany just needs to stop and we'll go back to things being normal. They can still exist in Europe. Like, no, like we all called for the complete dismantling of Nazi Germany. So it's interesting how, like you said, the Western media is trying to normalize that, not just with us, but also with the Lebanese people. And I would like if you can go specifically into a little history about this dehumanization of Lebanese people amongst Lebanese with the divide and conquer tactics, if you can. And I know this is spicy territory because I know that there's a lot of, differing opinions within Lebanon, but it's good that our audience is aware of the type of divisions that exist.
Yes. So there's a few things to understand about Lebanon. Number one is there was never a state called Lebanon. And Lebanon as a geography of what we know now includes multiple regions that were never administratively together. So you have the Mount Lebanon region that we can maybe call Lebanon, really, but the valley, the Beqa Valley in the center, was always connected to Homs in Syria, basically, and Damascus. Similarly, the south of Lebanon, south of the Mount Lebanon, is Mount Amil, which you could call in English the Galilee. And the Galilee, you have the north part, which is in Lebanon, and the south part that is in Palestine. That's another geographic area with a kind of a subculture and intermarriage between the people and so forth. It's like geographic zones that are natural. People stay within geographic zones that are natural. So now comes the occupation by the French and the British at the end of World War I, and they want to weaken the connection within the people of Greater Syria region, or the Fertile Crescent. And there was, of course, chopping up Palestine. And then the other is to chop up Lebanon out of Syria, making the trade from Damascus now having to go north towards the ports of Syria instead of the port of Beirut, or similarly so it's all about weakening the existing civilization or culture. And the other thing that made Lebanon a weaker state is because it didn't have any majority, religion or majority cultural group or regional group, right? So it becomes now that there's multiple layers of competing interests in this country, which makes it easier to control. And that's what the French did. The French put in a sectarian constitution. Instead of having a democratic country, one person, one vote, they purposefully made it that there is quotas for ministerial posts, for government posts, for depending on the sect. And they actually created a list of these religious groups in the country. There's 18 identified sects that are Christian and Muslim, and each one of them has a quota of percentage of how many jobs in the government they're going to get. And the president has to be Christian, the prime minister has to be Sunni Muslim, the Speaker of the House has to be Shia Muslim. So it's impossible to have a national consensus. Nobody, and you cannot vote as you wish. You have to vote. If you are a Sunni Muslim, you have to vote for a candidate that is Sunni. So what ends up happening is, for instance, the Hezbollah representative that had the highest number of votes was almost 500,000 votes. And to get a seat, he got a seat for that. But somebody who's representing the Maronite sect could get a seat with only 4,000 votes. Okay, so now how do you make this democracy, right? So it's impossible, and it's impossible to govern such a country, and it makes it always susceptible to either attacks from the outside or manipulation by more powerful states.
So can you go into a more recent history, kind of going forward to the war in Lebanon, where the Maronites were used as co-opted as an Israeli proxy and Western proxy to, I guess, turn against their fellow Lebanese? I know this is a sort of subject, especially if you're a Maronite Christian, but as a Christian, again, this is kind of dicey territory for an American white Christian myself to have a voice on this, because it's very problematic getting into, the internal political divisions of Lebanon. But I feel that as a Christian, I do have somewhat of a warrant on this topic, because despite me once being a willing victim of propaganda, especially weaponized Christianity against Islam once upon a time when I was a teenager, now that I've come out of it, 20 years on, I'm 20 years of deprogramming since I was in Palestine. I feel like I do have a warrant to somewhat be of a voice to the Maronite Christians in Lebanon, but can you just, I guess, briefly go into that, including what happened in Sabra, for people who don't know?
So look, part of how colonialism works is that it, beyond creating divisions is to try to manufacture identities, right?
Yes.
And those who don't understand what are the Maronites, there's Mar Maron, who's like Saint Maron. Mar means saint in Lebanese or old Semitic accent. Mar Maron was from North Syria, the parts that are now were made into Turkey after World War One. The area between Aleppo and Gaziantep, north of Syria, south of Turkey now. And the Maronite sects were oppressed by the Ottomans, and they moved south to hide in the mountains of Mount Lebanon. So here is just to show you how identities are manufactured to separate, right? They were part of the many other minorities that hid in the mountains of the coast of Syria, like the Shia, the Druze, the Sufi Muslims that were, trying to hide from Ottoman oppression and so forth, all hid in the coastal mountains. This is how it was in the old days. You go into a geography that is hard for the army to come after you.
Yeah.
So fast forward to World War I. Here is now the French trying to manufacture a Maronite identity merged with a Lebanese identity that doesn't exist also prior to World War I, and merging it somehow with the Phoenicians of old, right? Which again is another manufactured identity. Phoenician is what the Greeks called the Canaanites of the coast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's no difference between the Phoenicians and the Canaanites and the Philistines and the Pharaohs. These are all the same people, or the Carthaginians in Tunis. This is all the same people, called different names by the external people that visit them. So here's now, post-World War II, they're trying to create a schism between the Christians of Lebanon, who are mainly Maronite, and the Orthodox Christians and the Catholic Christians of Lebanon and Palestine, who were all against the occupation of Lebanon, of Palestine. If you're a Christian, you would care for the birthplace of Jesus. Right. You would care for the birthplace of John the Baptist and Mother Mary, right?
Right.
So how do you extract the Maronites, which are the biggest sect of Christians in Lebanon, from this fight when the Orthodox and the Catholics were carrying arms on the side of the Palestinians and their Christian brothers and sisters to defend their Holy Land? And that's where the French, manufactured this, this separation through their propaganda and this layering of government quotas and so forth,
which laid the foundation for Israel doing the same. So in this sense, France laid the framework for this strategy, and it made it a lot easier for Israel to do the same, to also use the evangelical angle of Zionist propaganda and try to assimilate that with Christianity in Lebanon and within Palestine. And
yes, the French and the English tried to create as many religious-based states around Israel as possible to justify the existence of a Jewish state. If every state around the Jewish state were, secular, as in the Arab revolutions of Jamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt or the revolution in Syria or so forth, then it will stick out like a sore thumb, the Zionist colony. So this is why the British supported the Saud family and their Wahhabi cult, right? And they fought every, secular, democratic, revolutionary movement in the Arabic world, whether it was pan-Syrian or pan-Arab, just to make it that the only comparison you have to Israel is another religious fanatic situation. And, it took 100 years, but it seems right now all the Arab republics that escaped colonialism and offered this secular, multi-faith and multi-ethnicity states that defend their own citizens just by on their citizenry are now destroyed, as we saw in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, and what have you.
So how is this playing out right now, currently in our current state? This is post quote unquote ceasefire, as Israel continues to break that ceasefire. What is, do you feel like the Lebanese have woken up to this very obvious strategy to divide them and make them weaker for imperial exploitation and industrial exploitation? Like we've seen the fall of Syria and how, you know, Jolani has become the new puppet for the, you know, for the empire, and we're seeing the attempt within Lebanon of the same thing to weaken Hezbollah, which has been the only group, mostly the only group that's been fighting back to protect the people of Lebanon. What are our current attempts happening right now within Lebanon to divide them, as we are?
Yeah. So prior to the war, you know, just living here in Lebanon, you could tell that the 100 years of propaganda was working somehow, right? We had the Maronites involved in the genocide of Palestinians during the Sumud Flotilla massacre and the Israeli occupation of Lebanon in the 1970s and 80s. But as soon as, number one, everybody watched the genocide happening in Gaza, and even the targeting of Christian churches and institutions in Gaza, add to it the non-discriminatory mass bombardment of Lebanon that hit many Christian villages in Lebanon, in the south and outside the south of Lebanon. And then on top of all of that came the collapse of the Assad government in Syria and the Wahhabi death squads of Al-Jawlani and HTS taking over the country and going on a rampage, killing minorities, Alawites in the coast, Druze in the south, and the Christians of Syria. By the way, for all our Christian brothers and sisters listening to this, you know, the oldest churches in the world are not in Palestine. The oldest churches in the world are in Syria, just outside Damascus. When the first Christians were running away from Saul, set on them by Herod to catch them and kill them, when they escaped with the head of John the Baptist, right? They hid in the mountains of the border between Syria and Lebanon, what we know now as Syria and Lebanon, before they descended into Damascus, where he chased them and then saw God in the street called Straight, and changed his name from Saul to Paul, Saint Paul, right?
Yeah.
So the churches of Ma'lula and Sidnaya, that are the oldest churches on the earth, right now were ethnically cleansed. The areas outside Damascus around Ma'lula, where people still spoke Aramaic, the language that was spoken at the time of Jesus Christ, and the Syrian government protected them and you know, made school and curriculums and everything in Aramaic to maintain the language, they've all been ethnically cleansed. Those churches, the priests and the nuns are hiding here in Lebanon, and their own churches don't want to talk about it. This is what's crazy. This is what's crazy. And you know that the head of John the Baptist, may God rest his soul, is in a shrine in the middle of the Umayyad mosque in Damascus. People go pray to him, the Muslims and Christians. And for the Muslims, he's Prophet Yahya, you know, and he's John the Baptist for the Christians. And I haven't seen one video of his shrine inside the Umayyad mosque since the fall of Damascus.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard one word from neither the Catholic or the Orthodox churches asking what happened to the head of John the Baptist. These grave diggers, these shrine destroyers, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, that are in Damascus right now.
That we're currently funding, by the way.
That we're currently funding. Nobody now wants to dare to even ask what the hell, or show me one photo of it. So
So let me ask you, if Hezbollah, for example, let's say they were in power in Syria, what would their actions be for the head of John the Baptist? What would they do? Most likely,
they would protect it, as has
right?
happened with
What
Ma'lula
what
and
what
Sayyidnaya.
what
When
what would Hamas do?
they would definitely protect it also. You see,
Protect it.
because
Okay, so the reason why I'm saying this is because I want the Western audience to understand. So I want to paint a clear picture here of what's going on, based on what you're telling us. If Hamas were to say be in control of Syria right now, the Christian sites would be what? Honored, as they are in Gaza. In Gaza, churches are protected. Hamas assigns special units to protect churches and to protect Christians. Hezbollah, the same thing. It's the duty in Islam to do this. But HTS, which is combined with Al Qaeda and ISIS, which are funded by US, aided and armed by Israel unofficially, they're destroying sacred Christian sites. So the reason why it's so important to make that clear contrast is so that a Western audience can understand what is being hidden from them and what is being shown to them in the Western media. Who is being painted as the villain and who are being painted as, allies with the United States. So again, for clarification, sorry, you can go on. I had to make that very distinct.
You are definitely right, and of course we all differentiate between Zionism and Judaism, as we should between Wahhabism and Islam, or Nazism and Christianity and so forth. So Hezbollah defended Ma'lula and Sayyidnaya and liberated them. If people can go back and look at the videos from 2015 and when Hezbollah liberated them, and the nuns and the priests kissing the heads of the Hezbollah fighters as they protected the oldest churches in the world. Now, all of this is happening, and the Christian population in Lebanon is watching this. And so the population that the West has propagandized for 100 years to make these Maronite Christians believe that they are separate from Lebanon or the rest of the population here, that they're different, that they are not the same, that suddenly understood that if the resistance ceases to exist in Lebanon, they're going to be butchered. Mm-hmm. And so within the Maronite population, there was a huge shift in opinion through this accumulation of the genocide in Gaza, the destruction in Lebanon, the indiscriminate attacks, and finally the genocides that were happening in Syria. That broke 100 years of propaganda accumulated in the minds of this population, as the genocide in Gaza has broken 100 years of accumulated Zionist propaganda in the minds of the world as a whole, right? So we have, as you said, we've crossed that window of no return on this propaganda. It's going to take them another 2-3 generations to try to rebuild such a level of propaganda in the heads of other populations,
which we won't allow, because our children will continue on our class war propaganda that we will wage. And that's the beautiful thing of it, is that no matter how much hard power they're trying to throw at defeating this revolutionary spirit within human beings, we're not gonna stop. We're not just gonna throw our hands up and be like, all right, I guess we'll go with your propaganda. Some will, of course, but the majority of us who are passionate, we're going to teach our children. They're going to teach their friends. Their friends are going to teach their friends. It's going to be exponential, and they can have all the hard power they want. We will win the culture. As you pointed out in one of your episodes, how Israel has lost the propaganda war, how you were highlighting how it is completely, Palestine has ripped the mask off the beach. Palestine has ripped the mask off the beast. For all the leaders and institutions that have been lying to their populations, and it's great because we're suddenly being exposed to the inner workings of these forms of propaganda. Whereas before we saw a shadow of it we knew that something was going on and bubbling behind the surface, but what Palestine did was like rip off, the Band-Aid, and we can see the true grotesqueness of the womb, But anyways, yeah, like you were saying.
Yeah, so now there is a huge shift in popular opinion in Lebanon.
Which is good to hear. I didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, I am very happy also about that, and you could feel it in the street. Look, there was one of these nasty imperialist TV stations, one of the nastiest actually in Lebanon, called MTV, and they were live on the street doing streeters, asking people in one of the richest neighborhoods in Beirut, that's supposed to be very right-wing, called Ashrafiyeh. And she was asking streeters, people, what do you think? Should Hezbollah disarm? And she couldn't find one person that said yes.
I saw that video.
Christian, not Druze, not nothing. So they had to end the live broadcast because they couldn't find somebody to support that. And so I think nobody will, follow the lead of the government here that wants to follow whatever the U.S. is telling it to disarm Hezbollah. Even the military here in Lebanon will not put itself in this position. This is guaranteed 100%. And so we're we saw.
Hold on.
Yeah.
You're blowing my mind here a little bit. This is good news. See, I was getting this very dismal view of things right now, but what you're telling me right now really is positive news. It's uplifting my spirits right now, because I didn't know what was going on. I was like, man, I hope they're not falling back into, the Western proxy. Hey, we're going to take care of you as long as you disarm Hezbollah. That is what you're telling me right now, is smacking me in the face with a lot of positivity. And I was under the complete a different viewpoint based on what you read in articles and stuff. So this is why it's so important to talk to people like you who are on the ground. Sorry, I just want to point that out.
Thank you, Mark. Look, the chief of staff, the head of the Lebanese army, General Haikal, he was ordered to give a plan to disarm Hezbollah by January 1st. And he's been delaying giving his plan. And we have been hearing a lot of leaked discussions within the military.
Okay.
And it's clear that General Haikal will refuse to disarm Hezbollah or use force against any Lebanese citizen. These words are what has been leaked from him. There is a possibility that the prime minister will try to remove him, or the president, which will cause a mutiny in the military. Okay. I think even if they bring a different general to follow this order, and that person actually says there will be disarming Hezbollah, there will be a mutiny in the military then. So it's a suicide move for the military to do that. Even without confronting Hezbollah, just thinking about it will be a suicide move, and it will disintegrate the Lebanese military.
Is this being reported on Western media at all?
No, zero, of course, zero. But it's here in the Lebanese media, the multiple leaks that came out from different staff meeting in the army. There was even a leaked, General Haikal went and visited the families of 4 soldiers that were killed as they were removing a unexploded missile that the Israelis had fired. And in that funeral, the family confronted General Haikal and told them that, amongst their extended family, there are members of the resistance. They have martyrs from this war, that they will. They are worried that he's going to use the military to face Hezbollah, and he promised them that he will not allow one bullet from the military to be fired on a Lebanese citizen. So I think this is a done deal, right? And now we add to it what's happening within the political class of the country. The prime minister, he in order to even get that vote on disarming Hezbollah to pass, he had to violate all the protocols and the rules of parliamentary meetings. Brought his motion into the meeting of the cabinet without any notice. There was multiple ministers that are out of the country on vacation, plus the Shia ministers all walked out of the meeting. There wasn't even quorum. And so if the prime minister continues trying to deliver on what the US wants, the government is going to collapse, and he will be out of his job before even any confrontation with Hezbollah happens. So these are all great indicators of how much the US harmed itself with this. Look, you talked about Ortega's and how she was humiliating the Lebanese people while she's in Lebanon. While we had Thomas Barak, the special envoy of Trump to Lebanon, who is actually the ambassador to Turkey, which we probably are going to be talking about in a minute.
Yeah, we will.
He walked into a press conference with the Lebanese media, and before the press conference started, he told them, I need you all to act civilized and stop being animalistic, or I'm going to walk out of this meeting. And he basically pissed off the majority of the media in Lebanon, which is on the payroll of the US, Israel, Saudi, Qatar, Emirates. So these are the good servants of imperialism. And Thomas Barak humiliated them to the point where these propagandists for empire had to come out and condemn him and ask for an apology. So this shows you in a way how there's a huge separation between the reality in the heads of the Zionists and the imperialists of what they are and what their power is and what's really on the ground. And the longer the more losses that they're having, well, the Israelis didn't win any war, neither in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Iran, in Yemen. The more they are separated from reality and in their bubble and unable to realize how their actions and words are harming themselves.
Absolutely. I'll dive into some, I guess, anecdotes of positivity you've been seeing within Lebanese culture in a second, but I first want to address something that I saw come across my feed was that they're trying to, or at least attempting to, push for a disarming of Palestinian camps within Lebanon, like Burj al Barajne. They now, of course, we know what happens when a Palestinian camp disarms. You have Sabra, you have the massacres that happen there. So what's the status of that right now, of the disarming of, or at least the attempt of, and by the way, Mahmoud Abbas is 100% on board with this plan. Of course he would. Of course Abbas would be on board with the plan of disarming Palestinians. So what's your take right now on the current status?
Yeah, he came a few months ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, Abbas, saying that before he came to Lebanon, he said he wants to disarm the Palestinian refugee camps.
Fucking snake.
And it was such a stupid thing for him to say before coming to Lebanon that the whole country was, plus the Palestinian factions were all pissed and so forth.
How does he survive? How is he surviving right now? I don't understand that.
He's surviving under the protection of his masters, right? He's a good house slave. And so he's all 90 years old. The guy is gonna die any minute, anyways. He's probably not making any
speed it up.
That statement even pissed off the Lebanese government because they were not ready for it. And he came to Lebanon. There was no official announcement of his arrival. There was no official press conferences. I think the Lebanese government was scared of what he's going to say in a press conference, that they just had a meeting with him and then put him back on a plane to leave. Now, that happened 3 months ago. And today, there's the pressure on disarming all resistance in Lebanon. And what we saw is Fatah, only Fatah, which is their president is Mahmoud Abbas, started doing these kind of photo ops of. It started with where you mentioned Burj Al Barajne, where they handed over weapons, but it wasn't their weapons. It was weapons of a weapons smuggler that the Palestinian security forces in the refugee camp caught smuggling weapons, and they handed them over to the police and the army and his weapons. Then came in the refugee camp outside Sur in the south of Lebanon. They pulled out weapons from the 1980s, from their caches from the 1980s. Again, it's only Fatah, not Hamas, not Islamic Jihad, not the PFLP or DFLP, only Fatah. And they are pulling out weapons that they're rusted, literally rusted machine guns and so on from the 1980s that haven't been used, and handing them over as if it's disarmament. I think it's all part of the propaganda that was required of Fatah to kind of add up to the pressure of disarming Hezbollah or any other factions in the country. And it didn't work out neither as a good photo op because of the weapons were rusting. And
this is great.
It just didn't play out well.
Yeah. I mean, hey, they're valuable in museums, though. You can get a lot of money for those rusted old AK-47s, man. I could use one of those. I'll restore it. I'll restore it back to health in a week. Just give it to me. Well, okay, so it's not working out, but we're being told in the Western media, hey, don't worry. The Lebanese government is disarming Hezbollah. It's going to be friendly to Western interest, and the resources will be flowing to the stockholders. Yeah. So, and that's another thing that people need to understand, that propaganda is not just. It's kind of funny. It's not just designed for Western average Americans to manufacture consent. It's also meant to manufacture hope for stockholders. It's because, mind you, like, there's two parties that you have to convince things are going to be going a certain way. There's the American, citizens, to get them to be on board with whatever atrocity the empire wants. And then there's the ruling class trying to convince people on the lower tiers of the ruling class to say, hey, buy these stocks because things are going to be turning over. So just understand that there's two tiers of propaganda happening right now.
Yes. And obviously, those lower class that spend all their money on the stock exchange casino are the first ones to lose all that money. Exactly. And the big guys know already when the crash is going to happen and sell out their stocks immediately before that. They never lose any money. The final thing that I would say about Lebanon is that there was a formation of a new resistance front. In the 70s and 80s, there was a front called Jamul, which brought together all the patriotic, and pan-Arab and pan-Syrian groups with Hezbollah and the communists and so on to fight the occupation. And that died out. Now, we had a press conference, I think a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, held at the headquarters of the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, the Pan-Syrian Party, that brought together Hezbollah, Amal, and pan-Arabist, communists, others that are all resistance, and said together, we will not allow the disarmament of Hezbollah. So now we have a very wide part of society, representing the vast majority of society, saying no. And I think these are all great signs that for the Americans or the Israelis, if they want to disarm Hezbollah, they're going to have to go to a full-out war. And neither Israel or the United States won a war here in Lebanon. As we saw the last time, the American troops, when they arrived here in 1982, they came out in coffins in the hundreds.
So on the last few couple notes on Lebanon, before we expand out to a broader subject, can you give me some positive anecdotes on the streets of Lebanon between different factions, whether it be Maronite Christians and Sunni, or Maronite Christians and Shia? What's the vibe? I guess, like, we covered things from a geopolitical analysis, but it tends to gloss over the everyday reality and the everyday conversations and progress that's being made on the streets. Is there any positive experiences that you can personally speak on that really gave you hope about the trajectory of culture in Lebanon?
Yes, yes, definitely. I mean, everywhere we go during the war, everywhere we went, the population was very hospitable to the internally displaced. And of course, a lot of the villages in the south that escaped the bombardments went to the north or the center of the country, where there is a bigger Christian population. So we saw how the churches and the Christian schools and the monasteries and the orphanages opened their doors to the Shia, the Sunni, the Druze, others. And that happened also in the Druze areas in the mountain, where many of them, again, opened all their institutions to absorb the internally displaced. And that spirit of, camaraderie continues till today. So we see, the different, charitable efforts that are happening to either rebuild or absorb students from the south that their schools have been destroyed. And that's all happening organically, with or without the involvement of the top tier of these societies. And that's shows you that there's a huge change in the internal feelings of the country.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's beautiful because one thing that I will be discussing with you very shortly, that I've already talked to G about, is that, as you know, I'm sure G has told you, I've joined the Black Panthers as a Panther with the Panther Party, and I've been brainstorming, I guess, roadmaps to revolution, like actual practical steps on an international scale that go along with Huey P. Newton's paper, his essay, Intercommunalism. And the way I see it, Lebanon is such fertile territory for this theory to be practiced because of the fact that Lebanon contains a variety of different factions that were once fell victim to the divide and conquer tactics, but now in the survival mode that they're in against this existential threat with Israel and Western Empire trying to divide them so they can exploit them, it's imperative more than ever for these particular factions to go not only get up, not only cooperate, but go out of their way to cooperate, actually form a tight bond and explore that intimacy that cultures can and that different factions can do, and the gaps that they can fill within each other for the sake of creating a tightly knit defense force and tightly knit defense mechanism against anything that the West is going to throw at them. So it's something that I will be discussing with you in the future, as well as the proposition that I talked to you on the phone, which we'll go into. But before we get there, let's zoom out and let's talk about the big psy-op that is affecting all of that whole region, which is Ottomanism. And this is something that the audience may not be familiar with. Can you please educate the audience on what Ottomanism is?
Yeah, so the new iteration of Ottomanism is to, maybe some of the audience will remember when Barack Obama was elected, the first, external speech that he gave was in Istanbul, and, kind of trying to fabricate a Muslim Democrats like the Christian Democrats that inherited the Nazis, right, in Germany. And that is the kind of the Muslim Brotherhood that is backed by Qatar and Turkey, versus the Wahhabi cult that is backed by the Saudis and the Emiratis, that were both of them competing for imperialist favor. And in Obama's version of this, he was gonna hand over the Arabic world to the Muslim Brotherhood or the Muslim Democrats that he's fabricating.
Mhm.
And that was followed with the plot of the Arab Spring, and I would like to call the Arab Autumn, where Al Jazeera manufactured these movements through their TV lens. And the first targets were two house slaves, the president of Tunis and the president of Egypt, which were both pro-American, pro-Israelis.
Yeah.
Just to make to move them easily, to get to the countries that they wanted to really destabilize, which is Libya, Syria, and Yemen. And so Neo-Ottomanism was this idea that Turkey is going to whip the Arabs into shape under the imperialist umbrella with Qatar's money and Qatar's propaganda machine. And halfway through that plot, the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Israelis rebelled, right, against Obama. And, threw all their Wahhabi death squads in the playing field and ruined the plot. And eventually, as we saw, even the Saudis and the Israelis put their money behind Trump to get into power. So it's part of these, on a global scale, the two wings of the empire, the liberal wing and the ultra-conservative wing, that have a fight that we see on a daily basis in the US between the Democrats and the Republicans. On a global scale, those two wings in the region here in Western Asia play out as the Wahhabis and the Muslim Brotherhood. One is the Democrats, one is the Republicans, and they all agree that we all have to be slaves to imperialism.
Yes.
But they fight over the loot of our dead bodies, basically.
Greg and Alina did an episode that covered what was happening in Cyprus, how Cyprus is being divided between Israel and Turkey. And the only, I guess, pushback I have on that episode against Alina and Greg was that I believe, just based on what this, historical precedent is, that Ottomanism is just another way that the West is going to, a sheepdog, the people, everybody within West Asia, to go towards a nostalgia. It's invoking national mythology and nostalgia of the Ottoman Empire days, because the Ottoman Empire days had a lot of great things about it, such as the rise of higher education, how you would see a peace between Christians, Muslims, Jews, with creating different universities. It was truly a superior system to what we were seeing in Europe. And so there is an obvious inclination for people in that region who have been nothing but subjected to Western imperialism and being divided and experiencing these conflicts that were seeded by Israel and the US. So it's understandable why you would want to look forward to a comeback of the Ottoman Empire. However, it ain't going to be the Ottoman Empire. It's not going to be anything like it. Those days are gone. But it's the same here in the US, where Trump likes to invoke a national mythology of the good old days. The good old days where Americans were, living that quaint, peaceful life, and they're successful. It ain't coming back. But so they're doing the same thing in West Asia by using Ottomanism. And I argue is that it's very much cooperative with the Western governments, with the US government. To think that there's any distinction between Turkey, the Turkish government, and the US interest is ridiculous, because we have NATO bases there. Like, Turkey holds our nuclear weapons. Do you really think that in any way, shape, or form they're going to oppose Western interests? They will not. If anything, it's going to be another Sykes-Picot agreement, Sykes-Picot 2.0. So it's important that, and it's weird because here, this is an American podcast, but we're using this to try and educate people in West Asia that do not fall for my country's tactics against you. they will use things like Ottomanism to try and sheepdog you to some false savior. And where in reality, the only thing that's going to save us right now, including us over here, as well as them in West Asia, is going to be an intracommunal resistance against empire in general, colonialism in general, foreign banking interest in general, any attempt to exploit the resources and the people, is something that should be opposed on a very micro level all the way up to the macro level. So, but I just wanted to know your thoughts about Turkey's involvement and its collaboration with Western forces and Western interests.
Yes, and obviously there is a pecking order, and Israel, as one of the madmen of the empire in the region, is at the top of that pecking order. So even if Erdogan, which serviced the United States and the empire as much as he can in destroying Iraq and destroying Syria and destroying Libya, he's still not going to be able to get a bigger piece of the cake than the Zionists. And that's what we saw now in Syria, where he was put in his place, told, no, there's a more important project called the Greater Israel, and they have priority, and you cannot think that you can occupy Damascus. Okay, you can occupy maybe only the north of Syria. So that's the reality of how much limit now there is. And I think this Neo-Ottomanism is now losing its luster, because it was a plot. They had all this propaganda made for it, and there was a boogeyman, the Assad government, and now the boogeyman is not there. And Iraq has 40 occupation bases, Turkish occupation bases in the north. Syria still has occupation bases of Turkey. So all the propaganda is falling apart. And the other thing that we see is that this Neo-Ottomanism, the word doesn't roll out of my mouth.
Yeah, it's a very clunky word.
Yes. So this Neo-Ottomanism is also reaching the end of its usefulness to the West. And what we see is a attempt to morph this Neo-Ottomanism into Neo-Mongolism. And because the Arabs are supposed to be the slaves of Israel now, therefore, what is Turkey going to do? Well, Turkey can do a reverse Mongol horde invasion. As instead of the Mongols coming from Mongolia and Central Asia, and where the Uyghurs and the Turkmens come, all the way to West Asia and to Europe, now Erdogan is supposed to create this path from Turkey to Azerbaijan across the Caspian Sea to rebring the Wahhabi hordes to Central Asia to cause trouble for Russia and China. Okay, so we will see, and this is why Trump wanted to rent and buy the land, the corridor between Azerbaijan and Turkey, and the stupid collaborationist president of Armenia accepted this deal. Now this is all about removing back the 200,000 Wahhabi hordes that the U.S. gathered from Central Asia and threw in Syria for the killing fields. Now they're going to go back the other way and destabilize Russia and China in their soft spot, Central Asia. So we will see that propaganda now morphing from Neo-Ottomanism to Neo-Mongolism.
Well, it's good to know that Neo-Ottomanism is out the door. So I guess we got this new beast to look forward to. But how effective, not to be, I guess, self-masturbatory, but how effective do you think voices like yours and voices who look at the greater picture about what's going on have had on these populations to kind of enlighten them to what's really going on? Do you think it's had a big effect?
I think so, but I think the biggest effect on enlightenment, not only in our region, but the whole world, has been how stupid the Western elite has been acting.
Yeah.
You know, like, you don't commit a 23-month genocide broadcasted 24 hours a day and expect people to believe you when you use the words democracy, human rights, women's rights, children's rights. Okay, it's done.
Yeah.
So similarly, this situation, yes, me and you as media workers, and all of these amazing media, revolutionaries around us that are doing all this work, have a huge effect with now media and social, social websites, whatever. I forgot even the name of this, like Twitter and so forth. But I think reality is now so severely in contradiction to the talk of rights and so forth that has been always at the center of the propaganda of the West, that it doesn't matter how much propaganda they drop on you. If there's somebody punching you in the face and they're telling you, no, you're not getting punched in the face, but you feel the punch,
Yeah.
right? There's no way, you smell sewage and they're telling you it smells like roses, and you're like, no, my nose smells sewage. So there's no way their propaganda can actually, if it was I'm smelling jasmine and they tell me, no, you're smelling roses, maybe I'll be like, oh, maybe something wrong with my nose.
Yeah.
But if I'm smelling sewage, you can't tell me I'm smelling roses.
That's
And
the
that is
risk.
how bad the propaganda is of the West now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the risk of telling a blatant lie that can easily be disproved. You better hope that nobody sees the truth, because if they see the truth, then they'll be like, wait a minute, not only were you telling me a lie, I'm now to assume that everything you say from here on out and everything you've said in the past is a lie as well, which is why I believe that a lot of this was a huge gamble. Like, they put all of their chips on the table because I at some part of me understands why they may have had that confidence, because when you think about the Zionist infiltration in all of our institutions, they had celebrities, they had banks, they had the media, they even infiltrated veterans groups. The evangelical world was completely under the control of Zionism. Like, they had a close relationship in lobbying these mega pastors, these big religious associations. And the technology they have, the simple way that they can spam the entire internet with bots. They thought that they had all of the artillery and all of the weapons possible to launch a successful genocide and have it completely be accepted by the public, because they controlled so many levers of media power and so many levers of administrative power. And so when you have that many cards, when you're holding that many aces, you go in with confidence with your bet. You put all the chips on the table, and thinking, and you tell your stockholders, you tell your investors, don't worry, we got it covered. But then the power of the people comes into play, where no matter how much censorship they do, just one video sneaks through the algorithm and it winds up on your feed, and then that video becomes a video that your neighbor is now seeing, and their relatives are now seeing. And that's why I always emphasize that no matter how much you do on social media, you need to equal that with the amount of person-to-person interaction that you're doing on a daily basis to reverse the propaganda and to defeat these psy-ops, because they can't control that. So, and that's, people like yourself, you've been on the ground. The thing about you is you're not just a podcaster or a media or a journalist. You're a person who interacts. You're a member of the community. You actually get out in Lebanon and talk to people. You get that human element, and you're a very friendly guy. I've known you for a few months now. I've never been able to talk to you face to face, but you have a charisma about you and a warmth that builds these bridges between these different factions. And people don't understand the power of that. They do not understand the power of being a charismatic person and being a warm person and building the bridges between different factions, how that is such a potent weapon against propaganda. you know, so hats off to you for that, Laith. You know, and I'm glad that I met G by coincidence, literally, because he saw my bald head. My bald head, I guess sometimes it actually does something good for me.
Bold
You know?
solidarity, eh?
Exactly. Yeah. So, and you had a scary incident that happened that almost gave me a heart attack a month ago. I couldn't. Somebody, I forgot who it is. I'll do a shout out in the description. But one of our members of Patreon put a comment saying that they have not heard from Laith, and they thought that something happened to you. So I said, let me check. And that's why I was reaching out to you. I called G. He called somebody. Turns out you were taken by Lebanese. Well, who was it that took you?
Lebanese military intelligence. And yeah,
What the fuck was that about?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's not clear exactly how we got where we got, but obviously somebody was pissed off at the work that we were doing, and somehow you know, got some questions put on my name, and some stupid lower, let's say, agents, they set up an ambush for me and Hadi, my cameraman, as we were arriving at a frontline village in the south.
Yeah.
And then I got taken, you know, for questioning for 3 days, moved from one jail to another in the military intelligence. And of course, there's nothing on me. I think they were trying to find something or fabricate something. But everything I've done all my life is out in the open. Every statement I've said is the same statement from 20 somewhat years ago. My positions are clear. And there was, thankfully, a huge backlash online against my arrest. Tens of thousands of posts by people following all these different social media, you know, or bloggers that I go on and so forth, including your own crowd. You know, people were sending social media posts, but also they were sending letters and emails to the Canadian embassy in Beirut, and that put a lot of pressure. And I was released. Thankfully, I was not physically assaulted or harmed.
So you were treated safely, let's just say.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's you're blindfolded and you're handcuffed for 3 days and you're underground somewhere. It's not a walk in the park.
Yeah, not pleasant.
The food was terrible.
It's the food that kills you. That's the shit that makes it even more torturous. If they don't make it.
And plus, I didn't want to shit for 3 days because you can imagine the situation of the bathrooms there. So
yeah, they didn't even season that food, huh? It didn't have the traditional seasonings in it.
I barely ate because I did not want to go to the bathroom. Okay, that's another layer.
You know what? That sounds almost as bad as eating American fast food. You don't have to go through what we go through eating our fast food, but it sounds very close. So, you know.
Yes, yes, it was, you know, but you know, given the realities of what's happening to Palestinian journalists or even Lebanese journalists that got killed by Israeli attacks, or you know, the journalists that got chopped up by the Saudi embassy in Turkey, if you remember a few years ago. I didn't feel that I had a bad experience.
Time. Yeah, except for the food.
Except for the food and being blindfolded for almost the whole time. So those a few things were, you know, but it's a life experience. I laugh about it. Obviously, it's not an easy thing.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm glad you're okay. I would not have known. I would not have known about the situation if it wasn't for somebody in the comments section. Like, it just showed that even I wasn't paying attention to what was going on. I was busy, and then I saw the comment, and then I went straight to our chat, and I was blowing up your chat. Yo, you okay? You okay? Hey, G, is he okay? Hey, G, call him up. What's going on? And then everybody's trying to find out, and then I see your text back to me. I'm like, okay, Thank God, because I'm not on your other channels. I don't know. I don't see other blogs, so I don't know. Who knows? So it's good to know that you're good to go. You gave me a heart attack though.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, but well, we will try to make this a regular thing. As I proposed to you, now that we've come full circle with these topics, there's a lot we could talk on, but I know you're tired and it's getting late for you. But I do want to broach the topic real quick about the idea of a revolutionary Congress that I proposed to you, of different revolutionary groups that represent different people. Obviously, we can't get every single group out there, but we're going to go with the core ones that I trust. Yourself representing the proletariat and the subjected peoples of Western Asia to represent their interest. And I can't think of anybody better than you to do that, to represent that. So hopefully this is a preview into what will happen soon. This collaboration with the Black Panthers, hopefully the Brown Berets, hopefully the Rednecks, hopefully the veterans, and hopefully yourself to represent, because you have a very bird's eye view of culture of the people in that region. You're very objective and you don't compromise. You don't compromise to liberalism. You don't compromise to neocolonialism or any of the psy-ops. And that's what makes you a very special weapon in this revolution, so
Thank you very much, Mark, and I'm definitely ready for that. It would be an honor to work with all these amazing people, and if any of us are not free, none of us are free.
Absolutely.
Because we will always be suffering on the other side of the planet if there's suffering somewhere else.
Absolutely, family. So everybody, just always be aware of psy-ops. And one of the most potent things you can do for revolution is build bridges between as many different factions as possible, and never compromise to the two doors that empire will give you. It will give you a red door and a blue door. Your job is to take neither doors and smash a wall through the back. That's what your job is. So anyways, we'll close out on here. All power to the people. Let's free Palestine, free Lebanon, free the whole region from this shit show. As always, love you, fam.